Welcome to the fastest stop in town. Today on Masechtas Avodah Zarah Daf Nun Aleph, we are going to begin on the bottom of Nun Amud Beis, about 7 lines from the bottom. Omer Rabbi Yehuda Marav. So he says the following: Avodas kachavim she'oidin oisa b'makel. Let's say we're dealing with Avodah Zarah, that a person is using it in the form of a stick, namely they are banging sticks together, and that is the form of Avodah Zarah. So, shavar makel b'faneha chayiv. If let's say you break a stick in front of it, then you're going to be chayiv. However, zark makel b'faneha potter. If you would throw the stick in front of this Avodah Zarah, then you're going to be potter. So, why are you going to be chayiv by the case of breaking a stick? So Rashi quotes the Gemara in Sanhedrin, the chol avodas shebifnim, any avodah which is in the base of Mikdash, she'avad behen avodas kachavim, in which is duplicated by idol worshippers, bein darka bekach, bein she'ein darka bekach chayiv. No matter what, you're always going to be chayiv. If they in any way duplicate the actions that are done in the base of Mikdash for the avodah zarah, it's aser, and we quote a pasuk. However, davar she'enu kein panim. If let's say it's an avodah that they do for the Avodah Zarah, which is not comparable to that which is done in the base of Mikdash, then it's only dark with kachayev. It's only if it's the derech of doing it in this way of worshiping this idol. It says Rashi, V'im hoya oiden oisa bezrikas makel. Let's say they throw the stick, lo matzi lemedek zarik makel b'fanehu pater. In that situation, since it's not the normal way of worshiping this Avodah Zarah, because again they usually bang sticks, so if you throw the stick, you're potter, because first of all, it's she'ein, it's ein darka b'kach, and also it's not something which duplicates that which was done in the Mikdash. As Rashi, v'im b'shviras makel, if you break the makel, palchi. Pshita d'chayiv. However, if you would, as we said in the Gemara, that if you would break the sticks, you will be chayiv. To feel lo dam lifnim, even if it's not exactly comparable to what's done in the base of Mikdash. El kagoyin shoya oiden oisa b'kishkush makel, that you like wave the stick. Oh, be'inyan acher, skipping a few lines. The dami shvir l'zvichas behema. The reason why is because breaking the stick is comparable to the avodah of zvicha, of shechting. So breaking the spine is like breaking a stick. It's similar to the avodah of the base of Mikdash, named shchita. Sheshayver mipirkata, because you break the spinal cord. Harizamach lefanah davar shuragilo boy. So that's the reason why you're chayiv when it comes to breaking the stick. Avol says Rashi, zarik, if you throw the stick, you're potter. Hoyel ve'ein avodas makach. It's not the avodah. It's not done in the base of Mikdash this way. Again, first of all, it's not the way that they do the Avodah Zarah, and also it's not comparable to Avodas Mifnim. Okay. So how come when you break the stick that we consider you chayiv the havilei ke'ein zvicha? Because just like breaking the spine, it's like breaking the stick. So zark nami havilei ke'ein zrika. So if you throw a stick, there's also an avodah called zrika sadam. So amalei beina zrika mishtaberes lake. It has to be a zrika which is causing little droplets, because that's what happens when you do zrika dam. The dam doesn't stay together. Rather, as Rashi says, it's v'noifel tipin. It all goes into small little pieces, into droplets. However, the stick stays together when it's thrown. So therefore, it's not comparable. Okay. That's the idea behind that. Esvei, so for the Gemara, Safaslot Soya Oshenasach Lefaneha. Let's say a person has Soa, Hachilot Soya, which is referring to waste, or libations in front of it with an ovet Shel Memeraglayim, that of urine. So on this we continue to Nun Aleph and Aleph, Chayiv. Says Rashi, "Afil ein avodas v'kach." Even though this is not the way of doing the Avodah Zarah, nonetheless you are chayiv. Now, bishlam of shel memeraglayim, I can understand when it comes to the urine, ikazrika mishtaberes. You can compare it to zrika, to the sprinkling of liquid which separates. So we can compare it to the ovet shel meiraglayim. Elotzaya ma'izrika mishtaberes ika. Why would you say you're chayiv when it comes to soa? So our answer is b'soya lacha. We're talking about a liquidy soul which will dissipate like that of the dam. So leima ketanoi shachel l'chagav. Let's say you take a grasshopper and you shecht it for the sake of Avodah Zarah. So Rabbi Yehuda mechayve. So Rabbi Yehuda will say you're chayiv for worshiping an idol. So you have a machlokas by shechting a chagav whether you're chayiv or potter. So my love hakamivki the mar savar aminan kein zvicha. The mar savar lo amin kein zvicha. That the question is the shechting of the chagav comparable to the shechita in the Beis Mikdash, and therefore since it is, then you're chayiv. Or mar savar lo amin kein zvicha el kein panim. It has to be comparable to what's done in the Beis Mikdash. So the question is, again, there's no slaughtering of a grasshopper to make it kosher, but it's similar to the shechita, like breaking a stick for Avodah Zarah. Lo, the kol yamol amrin kein zvicha el kein pnim be'inan meshani chagav hoyel v'tzavar duma tzavar behema. So it's not like the case of a stick, which is comparable to, again, like the shechita, but rather we just compare one creature's neck to the other. Says Rashi, so one says, Yehuda holds that we hold Kain Zvicha. V'aval pi delav Zvicha mamishi. Obviously, it's not real shechita. After all, the ein shechitas chagavim no heges, because there's no din shechita when it comes to grasshoppers. V'havi kishviras makel dechayiv. It's comparable to breaking a stick. Skipping a couple words. The point is, why does it use the example of the chagav? Because it's not talking about a situation of mamash shchita. Because if it would be talking about mamash shchita, then we've used other examples of animals that do require shchita. Fine. So he said again, the answer is that the kuyam amin kein zvicha. When it comes to the stick that's broken, even Rabbi Yehuda would say you're potter. Fine. Why? That has to be comparable to what's going on in the Beis Hamikdash. That's comparable to zvicha. Okay. Says Rashi, however, it's different by a chagav. It has a neck like an animal. So the reason is because it's ke'en shchitas panim. Okay, let's stop for a second. Let's look at question 7. Avodas kachavim she'oivden oisel b'kishkush makel, like the bang sticks together. V'hu shavar b'faneha makel, and you broke the stick. Ozar b'faneha makel shlo kedarka, which is not the normal way of worshiping this idol. Are you chayiv? What's the reason? So he said, by breaking the stick, you're chayiv because it's ke'en zvicha dihi avodah shebefnim. It's comparable to the shechita. Even this is not the normal way of worshiping the idol. However, if you threw the stick, then you're potter, because it's not comparable to zrika's pnim, because the zrika is mishtaberes, and the stick remains the same. So therefore, you can't compare one to the next. Okay. Let's say you have an Avodah Zarah that the Avodah is done with a stick, and shavar makel, and you broke the stick. Bifanel chayiv, the din is your chayiv, and not only that, the neseres, the stick is now aser. It's considered Avodah Zarah. Zark makal fanel, but let's say instead you threw the stick, so chayiv the enu neseres. The stick does not become aser. Why? Says Rashi, Doloi havi takroivis elamidi de kein panim. There has to be something which is kein panim for it to have a din of takroivis of Avodah Zarah for it to be aser. Sharmuli Rabbi Rav Nachman in Maishna. Shaver Hakam, when you break the stick, the Havila Kain Zvicha, Zorak Nami Havila Kain Zrika, it's like Zrika Saddam. Normally be in Zrika Mishtaberes Valeka. As we said before, it has to be just like the blood disperses, it has to be like that with the stick, but the stick remains attached. Okay. El Miata Avni Beis Merkolis Bamat Yasru. So why would we say that the stones of the Markolis, why is that usher? It's not something which is ken panim. I also had the kasha. Vishalti l'Rabba baravua, v'Rabba baravua l'chi barav, l'chi barav l'Rav. The question kept going down and down. The reason is because it's like throwing rocks to the big Avodah Zarah. It becomes part of the Avodah Zarah itself. So miyad, that it becomes aser immediately. They actually did worship with it. So tishtri, then these rocks should be mutter. Dahal palcha, because you didn't actually bow down to it, right? It was you only made it bigger. So kol achas v'achas nasas avodas kachavim the takroi v'sachaverta. That every rock that's thrown becomes avodas kachavim for the one before it. In other words, the one before it is the Avodah Zarah for the next one. So Yihachi basraisa miyatishri. So since no rock was thrown at the last rock is the last rock, and therefore the whole Isser is when you throw a rock to that rock. That makes that rock that was there Asr, because it's clear that you're doing it for Avodah Zarah. But the last rock that's thrown technically should be mutter. So Malay, you're right. But if you know which rock it is, then go take it. But we don't know, and therefore, since it's not nicker which one it is, we just say the whole thing is also. Says Rashi, there's no way to know which one's the last one. Which is why we say they're all aser. Alternatively, Ravashi nasis takuroibis la'atzma. It's considered to be an avodah zarah for itself. Says Rashi, "Shar'enu avodah cheres el zrika." The whole avodah zarah for the markolos is the action of throwing. Ubezrikasa nasas avodas kachavim benevedes. Yafil achrein in aseres mishum avodas kachavim atzma, because in itself is an avodah zarah. And it's a takrobis l'chaberta. Tanat. So we will like this. It says that Matzah b'roishai ksus u'mois. Let's say you found by the Merkolis some coins, some money, some clothes, so okelim har'il mutarin. If let's say you found parchili anavim v'atar shvalim, now all these different things are found by the Beis HaMikdash, like vines of grapes, of grain, v'yenois, shmandim, v'salasais, wine, oil, and flour, all these things can be put on the mizbeach, and therefore they're aser. Now, we obviously know there's all these things that are used in the Beis HaMikdash. Nisachayayin, for the mincha, you have a soiles, and shemen is put into so many things. Ve'ika ke'en zrika, and it's also ke'en zrika, mishtaberes. That we said that like the dam, which falls apart, so there's also Ela parchili navim atar shel shvalim, the vines of grapes or that of grain, look in panim ika, look in zrika mishtaberes ika. So why is it aser? So Amarava Amar Ula kegain shibatzrun mitchilakach, that it was plucked originally for that sake. Says Rashi, and since that's the case, we say the din is that it is aser. How do we know that if you would actually shech the behema, which has a blemish for avodah zarah, that it's mutter? Shenemer zovech le'elokim yicharim. that you'll be wiped out. Built Hashem Lavadai. Well, Asr Tari El Kain Pnim has to be Kain Pnim. And we know Kain Pnim is a carbon has to be a Tomim. It can't be a Baal Mu'um. So therefore, the fact that it was a Baal Mu'um, that's why you're potter. So Havi Bo Rabba B'mai. What are we talking about? Ilema Badukin Shiba Ayin is have a cataract in the eye. So Hashem B'nei Noichazi L'Gvaya. To them, it's fit. B'bama Didhu. With their own bama. Right? They're not makbin on Badukin Shiba Ayin. So what is Chacham and Boy? So then certainly you should be chayav when Badukin Shiba Ayin. El Mechusar Aver. We're talking about the case of Mechusar Aver, that the animal is missing a limb, that it's not fit for the Gavoya. And therefore, that's what it means by, if it's a Balas Mu'um, it's Mechusar Aver. And as Mechusar Aver, that is significant enough that you'd be potter. Then Rabbi Lezer Mechusar Aver Shu Aser B'nei Noyach. Then Mechusar Aver is Aser also B'nei Noyach. Shneimar Mikoil Achayim Mikol Basar Shnayim Mikoil. So Amar Torah Haba Behema Shechayin Rashi Evarn Shalah. So basically, he's telling Noach that you have to bring into the teva things in which are fit, which are not missing limbs. Says Rashi, Shagulav Yadul Afanav Shasal Hakav Noach, because Noach was bringing all these tahar animals into the teva eventually for a carbon. So therefore we see the B'nai Noach, it has to be it's not Mechusar Aver. So Hai Mikol Chai Meboyle Lemuti Treifa. I thought that's coming to exclude a treifa animal. The Mulahachio is Zarah Navka. That it has to be Zarah, namely something which can produce fruit, children. And an animal which is a treifa cannot. Well, is that true? Some people say that a treifa could have offspring. So Amar Itoch Medumalach has to be comparable to Noach. So just like Noach is complete, he's a Tomim, so too the animals. The Dilma Noach Gufi Treifa Havi, maybe he was also a Treifa. What are you talking about? Tomim Ksibe. Yeah, Dilma Tomim Bedrachav. He was just proper in his ways, but maybe physically he was a Treifa. So Tzadik Ksibe. Dilma Tomim Bedrachav Tzadik Bamasav. The Noach Gufi Treifa Havi, you can't say that. These are the Noach Treifa Havi. Amar Rachmana the Kivasech Ayil. Is he saying that you can only bring people who are like you? You can only bring in a treifa? Just like you, Noach, is a treifa, all the animals have to be treifa, the people have to be treifa. No. Obviously, Shleiman Lotile, a Shalom can't come in? No. Obviously, that's not true. So he's coming to tell you, fakert, that Noach is a Tomim, and you have to be like Noach, that's a Tomim, and not a Balmum. So where it says Hasha Nafkim Itoch, we already went out from there. Lahachi is there lumly. So Imi Itoch Havamina let's Savas Alma. Maybe it's just companionship on the Teva. If you'll Zakim you'll Sris, Kamash Lahachi is Zarah. That you can maybe have even a Zakin or Sris that cannot produce. That's why it says Lahachi Zarah has to be able to produce. Okay. Let's look at question TA3. Zarek Makla Avodah Zarah. So you threw a stick to Avodah Zarah. Im Chayiv Im Neser B'Makali B'Darav. So if Ein Derech Lavoda B'Zrikas Makel Potter Ve'enu Neser. Im Derech Lavoda B'Zrikas Makel. If that's the normal way of worshiping this thing, then Chayiv the Einu Nesar, that doesn't become Aser because it's not Ke'in Ponim. Okay. Which I think is the same question as TB5. Let's see. Zark Makal Avodah Zarah. And not break it, you just threw it. Are you chayiv, and is the stick aser? Okay, yeah, this is the same question. So let's see what I wrote. Im ein ovodas b'kach ze mutter. Aval im ze avodas hu chayev. Aval hamakil ein asurim mnei shetzarach ke'ein pnim v'leika. Beautiful. Beautiful answer. Okay. All right, weiter. Two dots. Amar Belezer. Menayin l'shoichet behemol merkolis. How do we know if someone shechs an animal for the merkolis, shiur chayev? Shenemar v'yizbechu oid es zivchehem l'seirim, which is referring to Avodah Zarah. Now, im enu Indian l'kedarka, if it's not referring to the normal way, d'chsev echiyadu hagoyim elu es Eloheihem, to do Indian l'shalok kedarka, that even if you do it in not the normal way that's done, which again, the merkalis is for throwing things at it. So the shchita is shalok kedarka. So that's what's going to tell you that even if you shecht for the merkalis, even though that's not really the normal avoda, you're still chayiv. I thought we needed to teach us something else as we continue to Nun Aleph Amud Beis. The Adkan hu medaber b'kodshim, says Rashi, Hai v'lo yizbechu b'parsha shchuti chutz ksiv. This is referring to shechting outside of the designated place. Says Rashi, Shakdisha mishas iser abamois, the time when you're not allowed to bring things on a bama, lach shehukam a mishkan, after the mishkan has already been established. During that time, it's the iser abamois. So adkan hu medaber b'kodshim shakdishim mishas iser abamos, the agreement mishas iser abamos, and you're mock of it during that time. Shari oinshin omer. In that situation, oinish of course is mentioned. Shenamar ve'al pesach ol moed lo heviu v'gomer. Oinish shemanu as harmonayin tom nolemer pental avotecha. Grab oven om Rabbi Eloi, diam Rab oven om Rabbi Eloi. Kol makam shnemer he shomer pen ve'al. Anytime you have those languages, enu el b'loisase. It's a negative. It's a loisase. And therefore that's the azhara. Mekan v'elech hu medaber b'kodshim shakdishim b'shas heter. After that, it's talking about times where you could bring things on a bama, which is before the Mishkan. Habamos heter abamos. The grievon b'shas iser abamos. Shnemar, and you're a makavit b'shas iser abamos. Shnemar l'man asher yaviu b'nei Yisrael es zivchehem asher hem zoivchem. She hetartil hakvar, that was already mutter before on private bamos. And then it says al pnei asada, m'lamet shekol hazoveach bebama, anyone who brings something on a bama. B'shas isra bamos, malvakasav ki'ilu hu zoveach al pnei asada. It's ki'ilu like you actually were worshipping Avodah Zarah. V'aviu ma Hashem zu mitzvah saseh, u'mitzvah soy saseh. So we see we talk use this pasuk for that. Yochi oynish kares tamud loimer chukas oyam tia zois lahem chukas lahem zois lahem lahem v'loy acheres lahem. So again, apparently we use this pasuk to teach us this din. Says Rashi, Alma las haris shchuti chutz kodshim, is referring to shechting outside of the designated place. Shekdusha b'shas heter abomois also. V'azharas markolos manolan. Again, how do we know the azhara for markolos? So Rabbi kari bei v'lo yizbechu v'kari bei v'lo od. So umaskana we see this warning is going on shchuti chutz and also for markolos. Okay. See the next Mishnah. Matzah b'roishai mois ksus okelim har elu matarin. As we saw already, if by the markolis we find money and all these different things, it's mutter. However, if you find parchilu navim matar shel shvalim v'yenis shmanim v'slasais, the whole damer shekiyotzimo karvagam mizbech aser. If you have things that would have been brought on the mizbeach, so therefore it's kein pnim. So therefore, that becomes also these things. So So how do we know to make this distinction? So one pasuk says that you see it's the testicles, which is aser v'eskil and it says eitz ve'even kesav v'zav asher imahem. So over here, doesn't it not only include silver and gold, but also wood and stone? The kesav echad lusachvei kesav v'zav aleihem. So over here, for some reason, the pasuk doesn't mention anything about wood or stone. So if you have wood or stone next to an avodah zarah, it's a mutar aser. So ketzad imahem dumid aleihem. That each pasuk complements each other. Ma'aleihem davar shel noi aser shena shel noi mutar. Af imahem davar shel noi aser shena shel noi mutar. Basically, it's saying that gold and silver is something in which is beautifies it. However, something which does not beautify, so therefore it's mutter. And therefore that's why in our Mishnah, if we're talking about things which are coins or whatever, so that's not something which beautifies the markolos. Deim aleim dum diamahem, ma'amehem kol mashi imahem, avaleim kol mashi aleihem. Maybe it's more inclusive to say anything that's there, even something like eitz be'evan. Im kain lo yemer aleihem. Aleihem is more exclusive, and therefore it's coming to tell you it's only gold, something which is like gold and silver, which is noi. So one second. Mois darishal noihu. Why does our Mishnah mention money? Why is that not something which beautifies it, having all these beautiful coins all over? So I'm Rabbi Rav Yanai bekis kosher. We're talking about a purse which is tied up. The toli boy b'tzavaroi. And it's something which is tied up around its neck. In other words, you don't see the money. There's money, but you don't see it. So the money doesn't produce anything of beauty because it's in a not beautiful pouch. Ksus davar shel noi, who asks the same thing about garments. So I'm Rav Yanai b'ksus mekupelas. We're talking about folded garments. And it's like put at the top. In other words, it's not wearing it, and therefore the garment doesn't beautify anything. So kli davar shel noihu. Again, why is that mutter? So Rav Papa, the reason is this chifa le mishkilta aresha. So basically, as Rashi says, kafur gavia aresha, that you put this like cup on the head, which is a kli orach, a long cup, like basically a washing cup. That's not something which is for beautification. Amar Basi Barachia, Kol Shulifnim min ha kilkolin, anything that would have been inside the curtain, says Rashi, Machitzahi Perus Lifnei Avodas Kachavim, which is some type of partition which is spread in front of the idols. So afilu mayim melch aser. If it's so close, then even if it's water and salt, it's aser. It says Rashi, obviously the lo lenoihu, that's not beauty. Kivan de kein pnim ninhu havi takroivus. However, it's considered to be kein pnim because that is something which we have on the base of Mikdash. We use salt. Al kol karban chatam, we bring salt, and also mayim, of course. Chutz l'kol, and let's say it's outside of this area, it's a little bit removed. So davar shel noi aser, shenu noi shel noi muter. Rabbi Yosef bar Chanina naktina, and our tradition is in kalkolin lula paor v'lo merkolis, that there's no curtain of this, not when it comes to Baal Peor or the merkolis. So what does that mean? Ilema diafil pnim kachutz dami b'shari. Are you telling me that there is this type of a curtain, and however, whatever's on the inside, we are lenient and we say it, even that is mutter. So hashte pru'i mefarin kamei ma'im melech lo makrivan lei. I understand if you're telling me that they actually relieve themselves on this Avodah Zarah, which is the Avodah Zarah Baal Peor. So you're telling me that ma'im and melech, they're not going to be makriv? Of course they'll be there. Fil chutz kimnim dami v'aser. Actually, it's fakert, that even the outside stuff is considered to be aser. So we're more strict when it comes to those things. Okay, we're going to stop there. Let's look at question 8. Avodas kecharm sheishla kilkolin. Let's say I have an Avodah Zarah which has a curtain, sometimes with a mechitza. So my nafkamina ben lefnim min hakolkolim v'chutz min hakolkolim ve'elu avodas kachavim ein lehem kolkolin v'din b'chutz kedin b'fnim. So as we said, anything which is inside this curtain, even if it's maim and melech, it's aser because it's kain pnim. Anything which is outside of that curtain, we say it's not considered to be takroivus, and it's not aser unless it's davar shel noi. However, when it comes to the Baal Pa'or and the Markolis, ein kulkolin, which we say that it doesn't make a difference where it is, inside or out, it's always aser. So we're more strict when it comes to Baal Pa'or and when it comes to the Markolis. Ad kan.